Samala test delay and some Shupa delays.
Hello, everyone. Welcome. Good morning.
Number Chama
I hope you're all well and happy.
That ring shouldn't the Komazu Konla Namju and Chigbare Kenabasama Tensuji checking is that the Tensudi Karina Kari in Serna that the Joe the Tosam Komsum Kare Chanaya Tene Kulong de Gachimbu Indu Tene Terena Tene Kulong Majuba the church, Jurma Jurbi Nane Tene Chod Jurba Tene Jamning Chanju Bisim Tisine Churchini that ring Chegi the Nakan of Yenge Digi Kulong Tone, you know, she is.
And today, as usual, before starting this teaching, I would like to remind you all that it is extremely important, whatever Dharma activity we engage in, whether it's listening, contemplating, or meditating, it's extremely important to set the right motivation. So if you haven't set a motivation yet, please do so. And even if you have, make sure that the motivation that you set is the best among all motivations, namely the motivation that embraces all of one's activities with loving kindness and compassion, the motivation of bodhicitta.
The name that rings you the Kare in Senate, just told me it's a bit just Laglen, so do you must say the rest.
And the topic of today's teachings is the 37 practices of the Bodhisattvas, which was composed by Tulku.
And Dela Tomar Gavale Gitun, Pardi Gava Shungitun, Tamar Gava Chugitun. Nang Sumire, Sumgi Nani, Dani, Tomar Gava de Legitun, the Chubar Javatan, Sambar Damjavani, Son Savare, that the rank of Baba de Pardi Gava Shungitun, Dela Deni Mundu Chola Juso, the Mushi Jibusum Lam Tembas, Ni Yebe Nani, the rank of Baba Deni Mundu Chola Jusul, Tambodi, Mundu Chola Juso de Dela Antony, subject number doing Nani, Deni, Dajunia Gabache, Tambodi, Nibadi, Poil Pomwache, Sumba de Embate March, Son Savares.
And so within this text, among the three virtues, the virtue in the beginning, the virtue of the introduction, the virtue in the middle, the virtue of the main part of the text, and the virtue in the end, the virtue of the conclusion. Within these three, we have already covered the virtue in the beginning, the virtue of the introduction, which is comprised of the homage and the pledge to compose. And we are now on the virtue in the middle, the virtue of the meaning of the main part of the text. And that also has two parts. The manner of engaging in the preliminary activities, and that's the first part. And the second part is the path of the three types of beings, the beings of the three types of faculties. So among these two, we are in the first part, the manner of engaging in the preliminary activities, and there are 7 such preliminary steps. And we have already covered the first 3 of these, namely the difficulty of achieving the precious human body with the freedoms and advantages, the practice of abandoning one's homeland, and the practice of remaining in solitary places.
Da kazan aranjo ngondo gichu dyungi nani dini daju milirumbuche di den yoba chegures top 차도 된 요바 chegures in the tambo de song anybody daju milirumbuche top 차we jela dini da 지게 남ing 지 독숨 그 중사의 사자들 마대와지니 독숨 중사 조디더니 파유인도 뻥거래선 도래 니나 숨바데다 독숨데 파뻥네 연뇌게 계사 연뇌 중사의 사자들 도온도 연뇌게 중뇌데 엠바르데 엔도 엠바텐 거래선다 숨바들 엠바텐 거에기 거디 니 손차버레스.
So these first three preliminary steps that we have covered are first, having established that we have obtained the precious human body with all the freedoms and advantages. First, we need to make this precious human life meaningful. Then that being the case, having this precious human life that we wish to make meaningful, we should not remain in a place of distraction, in a place that is the source of the proliferation of the three poisons for us. This place is the homeland, and therefore that is why we should abandon one's own homeland. Having abandoned one's homeland, one should instead remain in a place that is a source of good qualities for us. And the source of good qualities is a solitary place. So that is why one should remain in solitude, in solitary places. And so this is what we have covered so far.
Da drin shiba di midagba tenne teni tsedi le tong se jure da drin ki di midagba tenne tsedi le tong di subject page shiba dire teni ngondo gu chu dungi nane shiba di midagba tenbe tsedi le tong.
And so today we now reach the fourth preliminary step, which is recollecting impermanence, and therefore giving up on this life, turning one's mind away from the aims of this life. This is the fourth among the 7 preliminary steps.
The sumbi kapsu embatendu megi chanamashu indi embatendu da yana rang chikbu le dangbo ba ina teni rang chikbu ma imba teni chi chok chi nyamnyu yugin yana gewi shin yana chok sangbo chi kini da emba la pe du teni dela ngarangzula chi jignang jerda chikbu ril drawing da ngashi gire samba chi legir tangashi sona pe sare sene tende gi logic ke sona teni digi kare da jignang tende leb yongdo da kare komborsna teni midaba kombores di jigja da la hai chedu teni midaba dia bo she sona midaba dia bo komsona di takna jignang samale pa teni dal to kres.
And as we explained when we were speaking of the necessity of remaining in solitary places, as a beginner, it is best not to go all alone to solitary retreat, but instead to go either with a virtuous friend who has some experience, practice, or with a spiritual guide. And one can then go in good company to solitary places. If one goes alone to the mountain, for example, to do retreat, one may start fearing. Fear will come, fear for one's life, thinking, oh no, what if I die, and so on. And so the antidote to this type of fear is actually reflecting on impermanence. By reflecting on impermanence, really that is the best method to be freed from all these types of fears.
미제 배드 코랑 육니 다 등산들에 도 미카시 세대 르통 세대산데니 육샤니 참마 육니 유 롱제 빙갸 참마 육니 되는 거 리디어 트레던 지게 로고 첨보다 시니 조샤기다 덴데 serge요 마레스 나 갑스 파워
And so here for this fourth preliminary step, which is to turn one's mind away from the concerns of this life. What is by reflecting on impermanence? What is meant by this is not necessarily to give up everything, give up one's whole life, give away all one's possessions, leave all one's friends and relatives, and go do retreat all by oneself, like some people may do nowadays. Very courageous people do sometimes, but that is not what is meant here, actually.
The Tsering de comes babalash tsedi le tong sedu shencha le tangbore serda shencha tanda koe di dela tsedi le tong sedu zani shencha de le tongbore chue chiginji ina tani chue shama ji chiginji ina de shencha di rewa da shencha di da le tongbore tanda comes baba koe di tsedi le tong sedu.
Actually, what is meant here by turning one's mind away from the concerns of this life is actually giving up on attachment and craving. If one is a real Dharma practitioner, then one should give up on all hope, all attachment, and all craving in this life.
Tani nga kazi chigenji yosona di medigi sambala kare jung khande yongorasana ta nga shina shi kazi nga chena shina shi ni gichedo nga shina shi sene dendege sambaji le yongores tani yaboji drup tu gures de la dani chi khansa parji mebe nga ne drup tu gures.
And if one is such a Dharma practitioner, this type of Dharma practitioner, what sort of thought does such a Dharma practitioner have? Such a person thinks, if I die for the sake of practicing the Dharma, then I die. It's okay. If I must die, then I will die. Whatever happens, may I accomplish the Dharma. May there be no obstacle to my accomplishment of the Dharma. Whatever happens, happens.
Shenja le tong se di midaba yabo uji shama ji gyule keba ina teni shenba rewa da shenja tons nyungru cha dugri midi kansa dela karsana ko taha gugura midabe ranshin re teni kebe thamani chiere dube thamani daere sin kola teni ha kodu teni ko shenja nyungru cha angure pena shenja kesa ge yul dawji peje ta rangi pamare pingyare ani shemba teni gyunor longje re teni sumba di teni rangi lule ta dela rewa da shenja shukchumbo ke undu teni midaba matena ani chiko nga shisa mare ten gyunor longje mang sakaya dang te pingya nye dang pamala 가서 그래 현재 체로 도서나 Tini chiga ngarazo yurungbo degire chayne sambaji le ngudwa lo tunju jaju gubju de ko sim dende gala shenja gala dro dedu tini chöla barji chenpo je ngu res chö yambo ji drup tugu mares.
So giving up on attachment and craving comes from reflecting on impermanence. By reflecting on impermanence, then naturally all one's hopes for this life, all one's attachments and cravings in this life will be reduced, because such a person who has really contemplated impermanence knows that all birth ends in death and all accumulation ends in loss. So knowing this, all of one's hopes, one's cravings, desires for this life will naturally be reduced. Because in this life, what are the objects to which one is the most attached? Those are one's relatives, one's parents, money, wealth, and so on, enjoyments, and one's body, right? These are the objects towards which one has the most desire, the most attachment. And if one does not cultivate an understanding of impermanence, our attachment to all of these objects will only increase. Our desire for more wealth, our attachment to our relatives and loved ones will only increase, thinking that we will stay in this life, that we still have a long time to go in this life, maybe 70, 80 years. If we let our attachments to all of these increase in this way, that will be a tremendous obstacle to our Dharma practice.
Chö yagboji drugi ina tangbo shina pango pangjan jingures. Pango jena de chö yagboji drup tugure penangema kadamba 풍물 주세진 가남베기 담가 다요나 메나 데 로푹 쳬라데스 쳬푹 장라데스 장푹 시라데스 시푹 자동 깜불라데스 지도 가담베기
나서
로 단다 가랑소 그 셈바 쳬치긴 약보 쳬약보 지긴지나 로디 안에 쳬라데고레스 chö ya bo ji chö ta bo ji xie da chö nang la mi da ba re de ni jam ro sim ji da jam yin ji de zo chang ma le ya de ji lo bu chö le de chö phuk de chö gu da ya bo sha ma ji du gi na chö yang ya bo ji ga so go re nyam le ya bo ji ji ga sa ji cha go yo ba cha go gi yo na de ni chö bu de zhang la de go zhang bo yin go re zhang bo bang go the Tangbo ina ko Zimba Shuksa, Shensha Shuksa, Meongdu, ko Churanga, Sempati Ongdu, Tini, Nashina Shina ko Joba Meri, Shina ko Tangna Meri, Zimba Shuksa Medu, Nashina Shin, Lote Ojinguri. Ni Chubu Tangla, the Tangpu, Nishila des, the Tangpu dita, ko Choba the Tangpu Tanga, ko Shiere. Takazi ko Midabaranshi into Nimachi Shigo into she do the cola, Jignan Kayama, Tangna Kayama, Kanasana cola, Kia. Samba ka mewa chaksa samba chaksa mewa rewa yo mare shenja chaksa gi loya yo mare ani chubu shila de shibuk de ni chagdong kampo le de ko shisa de chagbu ji re sa kampo dang de de ji ma de me yu ta di ma do me re ko la sa ja ki dre ka me yu ta chöba yang ta ba ji na ko changbo chang ja ngor ko changbo de la ko changna yong gu mare changbo chöba ya bo ji ge ji na 시계 말했어요. 다시 이다. 그 근데 취자 보지 지tum나 멜라를 받아.
근데 직체 타마디 시푸 가르라체
작동 간보 작동바 케이크
작동 간보 알았어.
미치 셴바 축부든전나 강바 멍보 즉부 아니 슈티 다 같이 미카지는 뭐다 강바여라 Ko jalang mongbo le chap du ra te mi choba ya bo jena shisa thakdong kampo ma de mere ko ka mere chala jugbo ya mare ka ya mare thakdong kampo na la ru bu de pa yung do jire.
So, actually, if one is a true, genuine Dharma practitioner, one should actually give up absolutely everything. There's a very nice quote of sort of an oral instruction from the Kadampa, the old Kadampa masters, that goes, the core of one's mind should be directed to the Dharma. The core of one's Dharma should be directed to renunciation. The core of renunciation should be directed towards death, and death itself should be directed towards a bare cliff. So what this means is one's mind should be entirely directed towards the Dharma, reflecting on impermanence, reflecting on impermanence, and reflecting on the Dharma. One should give oneself wholly over to the practice of the Dharma. And as a Dharma practitioner, if one is a good Dharma practitioner, then with no other hope, no other attachment, one gives up everything and becomes a total renunciant. As a good renunciant, one has nothing to be attached to anymore, nothing to cling on to in this life, no wealth, no objects of attachment, and therefore one can give oneself wholeheartedly to death. And not owning anything, not having a house or a car or anything to be attached to, having nothing that we could cling on to as we pass away, then one leaves one's body to the bare cliffs. So that's an old Kadampa kind of oral instruction. When one has given up everything, fully understanding impermanence and fully understanding the meaning of the Dharma, once one has given up on everything, then there is nothing left to fear in death. And in fact, it is said that some Dharma practitioners even defy death and achieve the deathless state, such as Milarepa has.
That the Tsering Tong Midago go ne Tsering Tong gore se the subject tanda Shiba Diridu digi Zawa di Yuring dog bizashi so dal baby do be norze shuldu lu gi drunkang namshi jumbo bur Tsering Tong gyase lali yin sungda.
So this is the practice of turning one's mind away from this life through the reflection on impermanence. And the root text for this reads, "The practice of all the Bodhisattvas is to renounce this life's concerns. For friends and relatives, long acquainted, must all go their separate ways. Wealth and prized possessions, painstakingly acquired, must all be left behind. And consciousness, the guest who lodges in the body, must in time depart."
That Tsering Tong se di Tsering Tong se di Tsering da Xianjia Le Tong se di Xianjia Le Tong kanxin di Xianjia Le Tong gore se na teni da ngarang zo chokbo inare pingya inare nor inare rang lu dire che present lu dire de changma da midabe rangshi imbala teni di Xianjia ji pang na yakbo yore se ge yore sanda kaps baba dela.
So what this says is, why should one turn one's mind away from this life? Why should one give up on all attachment and craving? The reason for this is that we recognize that the nature of all our objects of attachment, our friends, relatives, wealth, and even this body, the nature of all of that is impermanent. And so that's why it's good to give up all attachment and craving for these objects.
Dela sedwa yuring do bezashi so dal seduzani tangaranzo ji khashida phamanyambo mi peje eshe longba ngaranzo longba danga longba dawe na mi peje lo chembo chana ya pugu de zo phamanyambo degire lo nishu sumju shibju peje khasi phamanyambo degende de yore ani binja nyambo degi kashi da chobo chombo nyambo la degi kashi yang garo rana choga cheme da yuringbo de deni da khandi inare binja inare rangi gato inare rangi binja inare nazu changma tanda negabji ji nyambo la de deba daboji yore mato deni nimaji da ngaranzo lo mangbo yana rang nyambo la ki dwe du gyundu nyambo la dwe da nyambo ki dwe da nyambo de ji yo mares nimaji rana su su dogores ngamji mebaji rana su su nimaji dal dogores pa khagachi ne dal dogores der yuring dobe zashi so so dal se do kaze yuring bo dena da ko te ta ko tembo yo mare kashi 창자 잡네 피지 니만이 숨절아야 카가차 두게 했는데도 kashi 파마 보고 된저 촉바자리 니마 찍니 대 양대 카다 두게도 kashi 양니 창자 잡지야 니마 kashi 졸라 시 두게 도야 카가 잘 두게 했는데도 kashi 대 파마 보고 제바다 보고 양시 두게 했는데 요래 나랑도 쟁게 요래 다 쉬우지 대 요래 쟁 kashi 창자 잡도 이나래 되니 가서 나자지 다가 로 자주 굽주 벌도 냐ම්부 디기 저랑 카 되게 매스 라고 여라 니마치 고 제도거래 가 되게 매스네 대지 요 마레스 틴도 유링 도베자시 소소 달스 이거 니마치 나라서 카가시니 도거레스 카가 달니 도거레스 냠부 대요 마레스.
So this line here, for friends and relatives long acquainted must all go their separate ways. For example, in much of Asia, in my own country, for example, many people live with their parents even as they get older. They might remain with their parents for 30, 40 years and so on, or with other relatives, or one may be living with one's partner or one's husband or wife, or with friends and so on. Whoever it is, whichever the case, whoever we may be living with, our time together is only temporary. Our time together is only momentary. Even if we get to live together for many years, this won't last forever. It's we're never permanently together. One day we will have to go our separate ways. One day we will have to separate from each other. None of this is permanent. We can see some people get married and even like separate after a few days, they get a divorce. Or some people living together with their relatives, with their parents, get into a fight and then move away, separate from each other. It also happens that some people marry and one of the spouses just dies a few days later, or sometimes children die right after childbirth, and so on. All of these are possibilities. So even though we think we might live, we all think we'll live to the ripe old age of 80 or 90 years old, thinking we'll have long lives. And we may say to our loved ones that we'll never let them go, never leave them. Still, whatever happens, one day we will all have to go our separate ways.
That's all the Kazinyambo 유릉부 대나 이마지 잘 dro그래 잘 dro베 캡슐라야 되니 나라조 미망치바지 동아침보지래 아 지그랑 가사 니니데 간디주나 디 다소나 셈발라 동아침보 용구라야 되니 가지 마자바 냠볼레 대바이나야 되니 미망치바지기 삼로 가르탄거스나 디 마옹발라 지게 랑기다 제와치서기 니니데 조 동모 간디나 된들라 되니 지 pe cewa chimbo chi che de ni maung ba gi ta khade chi ko sa re samla mong thang de gi ro ya chi ya ge khande tang ko sa re nyam bo khande te ko sa re khande chi ni cha ko sa re sen chi ngara zo mi mang che wa chi jig ding gi ta di zo de ngara zo khare shi ge na jig ding bi do dang shi ge re ta jig ding gi do dang la ta den ri nyam bo ping ja nyam bo de chang za ja nyam bo de de jig ding khorang gi ta do dang ji de do de la de ni ngara zo ta chi mi da ba re 이마지 잘 죽이래 유링보지 내기 말에 그 미다베란시 인규레스는 되는 삼을지예요 말에 야나니 조두 셈바교 셈바 동알 망보지 중 만들어나니 됐고 마음바게 차시 망보지 띵니데 간디진 다른 제와 전부 약부신 되고나 된 대샤게 요레스 데 디캅스 바블 캅스 왔더니 지금 미다바르 야보데 제지나 젠나 니가라 현자 용으로 차용 거래 되니 차 용도야 동아 용고 말에 이 마음발라야 차시 망부지 띵 값을 레와당 현자 전부 매발이나 띠고 지게 마음바 차시디 아버지 마주바 이나야 딜라 동아 망보 용고 말레스
And when that happens, when loved ones are finally torn apart, when loved ones have to separate, most of the time there's a lot of suffering involved. This is very difficult, very painful to lose a loved one, to have to separate from a loved one is very painful event. And even if one hasn't been separated yet from one's loved ones, still, for most people, there is so much concern involved with making plans for staying with that person, so that whoever is the object of our love, whether it's our relatives or friends, our partner, spouse, and so on, we are constantly thinking about the future together, making plans for the future, fearing separation, possible separation, planning how to improve the relationship, planning things to do together, and so on and so forth. We spend so much time just thinking about how to maintain and continue the relationships we have with our loved ones. This is the general way of the world. This is the way most people live their lives in a worldly way. Most people live together with relatives or get married, and don't necessarily think about impermanence, don't necessarily think how one day separation is inevitable, and that the time we have together, whatever it is not that long. However, if one does think about impermanence, if one does recollect impermanence at times, then that will decrease the desire and attachment of both people involved in the relationship, which will reduce the pain of separation. The day when separation comes, if we have less desire, less attachment, then the pain of separation will be lesser. And likewise, the pain of not accomplishing all of those plans, all of those projects that we had together with our loved ones, when these don't come through, there will also be less pain and less disappointment if one reflects on impermanence regularly.
Pepe to be Northishil to lose. Did that Rangi Jordan, Zashi, that Pinja Pichibu Maimba. Rangi Kali Japsha, you know, Lonju than Zoya, the name, Chiga Shenchashira, Chia Mares, Karisana, they are Nimagic Pa, Union Drogores, Kaze, Kali Jabaina, not Longe, Chedu, the name, Kachimbo Ziba inare. And Dilaji Daniel Kazi, Shubshimbo Chinare, Serna Chini, Sha, Masa, Range, Masa, Shana, Mateva Chini, Shasha Maina, Dian Imagini, Tal Togores, Didampa Talni, Imagi Yugni Ranchu Butogores, Kalishani Togores.
And likewise, wealth and prized possessions, painstakingly acquired, must all be left behind. So this doesn't apply only to our loved ones, our friends, relatives, and so on, but it also applies to all the wealth and the possessions that we have put so much effort in acquiring, all the work we do to accumulate more wealth, more possessions. No matter how much effort we have put into accumulating things, in the end, we will have to leave them all behind and go alone and naked. Everything will be left behind. In the end.
Pena Mikashi that you nor Kazi, Jikale Jabni Pata, Sasha, you the Nikale Jaba is and then in Dilaji Shenja Chimbochin, Zimba Chimbochin, Kodila the Nick, Kansa over Ngarampe Jumbui, Ngarampe Yabui, the Rejik Samni, nor longe de la Dini, Daniel Chini, they get that in Imagico did you know longe the rang, Midaba Samla Bojetang Machine, they call a Caleper. Tadi Lagire, Sambajingure, Tadi Karichiguna, Sambajingure, Tadi me talk dogure, Togire, Sambatang. Tadi Lago Senapini, Kugu Marita, Karicho, Mambo Tangsonata, Pisha Zodu, Sambayingure. They indicate that Nimagico di Midaberanjin Bahama Hosuna. The Nicola Kangashu, Nikugu Mare, Kalasa to Mare, the Nichi, Kawadona, Jigna, Chimbojungures. They indicate Jimzen Harson, the Sanani, Ranimaji, the Cablola Yumi, the Rangipo, Dogo, the Sambaji, Colamidabi, Julia Abuji Majibi, de la Ten, the question, Chimboji, Lord Gayungures.
Some people who have gone through great trouble and put a lot of effort in accumulating a lot of wealth, if they don't think about impermanence, then they may get very attached to their wealth, cling onto their riches, and feel very proud, thinking they're I'm such a great person, I'm so rich, I'm so powerful, and so on. And so with their attachment comes great pride. And because they do not reflect on impermanence, then because of that very strong attachment for their status and their wealth, then they might constantly worry about how to keep their wealth, how to protect it, how to make sure it doesn't get stolen, thinking, oh, I can't spend too much, or I'll lose it, or how can I make sure no one takes advantage of me, and so on and so forth. Losing sleep over it, losing appetite over it, being fearful wherever they go. This type of fear can come when one has too much attachment to one's wealth. But if instead one brings to mind, one recollects that one day everything will have to be left behind, then such strong attachment will not come, such strong attachment will not occur.
Adila the Ying Shu the Kongla Shubai, the Shenja the Rewa Kesa, the Yu Sundus, the Jiganguela. Yu Tambo the Yul Tambo the name drop down Zashi, Tarangi Topo Tomore, the Pigia, the Pamare, the Zot. You chik reduce Shenja Kesa, the into the Gong Tambo Chik Tambo did it. Chik Niba the baby droop in Norzushu to lose the Shenja Kesa, you Niba the Northern Longere. Tarangla nor longe Kari Yunare, Guyunare, Kamba Yunare, Modra Yunare, Kolo Yunare, Kari, Yunaya, Saja Yunare, or this Hama de Northern Longe, that the college of the Shenja Kesa, you chik did it. Then you nibadi, the Yusumba de Tanda, Luigi Drongan, Namshi Drumbo Boris, the Sumba de Naranzo Shenja Kesa, the Zo de Naranzo Ludicha de res, Ranazo Jebers and Ludicha de res.
So as I mentioned before, there are three main objects of attachment. The first object of attachment is our loved ones, our friends and relatives, family, friends, loved ones, and so on, which are mentioned in the second line here of the verse in English. The second object, the second main object of attachment is wealth and possessions. Whatever these are, house, car, clothes, land, and so on, and this is the third line of this verse in English. And the third main object of attachment is our own cherished body, our own bodies that we cherish so much. This is the third main object of attachment mentioned in the fourth line here of this verse.
Luigi Drongang Namshi Drumbo Boros Sumbadi Mimang around the Ludilla Shenja Piji Tingsang to Ludilla Pe Message Shenja Chimbo Yungudwa, the Nga said so that Shenja Pama Pinga, you know, Longjola, Shenja Kegwe, Kesa Yuji Chade, so the Taranaso Ludilla Cheper Zimba La Teni, the Ni Chagres, that the Mingazu de la Teni, Ludi Shenja Chimbo La Teni. Ting around Subut la Sungyo Pechigiris. Sungyo. Da Nas Kashi Sungyo, da Kantata, Manaya, down the Nichi Mola Juga, down the Neji Kare, da Matanga, down Chao Chana, the Chao Chaos Niang, Jig Mambuji Tangmos, the Ludilla the Jig Tende Sungyo Mambu Chetana Yabu Yambushera Chichigore, that Lucia the Keva Lane Savagella. Yanji Nazara Chungsana Dilaya, Chotengi Gola, Songjo Chi, Jigores, Yena, Takba, Tempo Meva, the Ham, Tendeshana, Chidena, Takbar, Takba. The Midabe Hamago, as in Takbares, and Lubo de la Cheper Shumbo Zindena, Dinia Kali Yogures, the Yondu Tanda Caps Baba de la Ludi, Karazana Luigi Tanda de Love dot sick de la. Luigi Dongkang, Namshi Jumbo Borsete, Lui de Tabatemo Mere. When I'm around the guest house, the Dongkang Towers, Yana Kambaji Karanji Lan, Devana, Tawaji, Yana, Tawani, Yana, Lokashi, Dendejik Mado, Nimaji, the Kamba, the Uni Drogores, the Ludilla Cheper Shenja, Chumbuchina, Shuk Chumbuchina, the Yaboyo Mares. Imagine Lude Dongkang, Kamba guest house, Doko, Nimaji, Lude Uni Drogores.
So this fourth line reads, in consciousness, the guest who lodges in the body must in time depart. And this concerns our very strong attachment that most all of us have for our bodies, right? The bodies to which we identify as me. Compared to, of course, we have a lot of attachment to our loved ones, our relatives, wealth and possessions, and so on. But really the main object of our attachment, that which we cherish the most, is usually our own bodies. And because we cherish our own bodies so much, we put so much effort into protecting the body and taking care of the body, making sure it doesn't fall sick, making sure we warm it up if it gets cold, or we cool it down if it gets hot, and so on and so forth. We put so much effort in protecting this body, keeping it safe, taking care of it, which of course is necessary to do. We should take care of our bodies. Otherwise we might fall ill, or just generally deteriorate our health, which is, it's good to take care of our health and so on. However, one should not do so thinking that this body will remain forever, forgetting that this body too is impermanent. Because if one has such strong attachment for one's body, if one cherishes one's body that much, that too will create a lot of difficulties for us. Because this body, like the rest, is impermanent. As the text says, it's like a guest house, like a hotel, where one stays a certain amount of time, maybe a month, a few months, a certain number of years, whatever the time frame is. In the end, that lodging too, that guest house of body, we will have to leave behind. We will have to depart, even from this cherished body of ours. Even that we will have to leave behind, just like a hotel in which, or a guest house in which we remain only temporarily.
Indo da ludi pedi jongang abusha ani guest da di jongang na le degin jumbo di namshi le peshares da jongang de kaze kibu juye na ya shama kashi ji de re da ludi kaze ngazo ge sunggyop chena ya tene ji 가지 되기 위험에 다 하고 그러면 되나시 전부디 루디 전부 정황디 낭로라 정황다부디 기부 가지 연아야 디 가지 대 기부 가지 대토 마도 가서 하고 그러 말에 니마제 정황의 용는 저거래 니마제 남시 고난 기부 저거래 남시데 저도 루디 파 유셔도 남시디 다 콜라 균요 말에 콜라 통마 요 말에 타마 요 말에 남시디 Teni namshedi ta sechima ta drodo gires ko ma droyongdu ta namshedi ji di hindu ngarangzu tanda nge da del midaba di gechumbu imbi gyumzen kharich khanjin shugu yesena ngarangzu mangchewa di tanda chue de che de chigbu mayimba che de chigbu gibu yongaya da yapo yongaya ge chue cheba ina da mixi chue chi goyas yo mare pije chongyap 칼라 야보사 꼬라 야보 겹 대나 페제체 디 야보 용그레 다저 최체의 금전디 세치마당 다 드랍레 야보 주나 다지 지게 나랑조 담지 김이 고바 산지 고바 원동 낼기 고바 디마숑나염 세치마 미당 라이 드니 개와 야보지 레기 치도 추치게 레스 세대 직부만 세대도 삼라 야보지 나는 세대 배 통동래 거 다른 뭐 말에 세치만 빼 메시를 부래 가르르스나 통마요만 타마요만 매도 세치만 빼 메시를 부래 다들 당장잡는 당장자세요 말 네 인도자니 세대 직부 마인 바치니 세치마 그쳐도 세대 고 미다브라신도 되니 들라지 지 알아도 삽삽신 다 교보지 마시나 용사 말에 삼바지 진의 현자 융으로 땅 거야 돼 게춘보도 단 남시들라 삼로땅 루디 종하에도 마샤는 저거래 남시디다 지게 개와사나 되기 유 개와사나 들라더니 디부 기부 용하에다 델루 메게와사 셈디 미게와사나 되게더니 지 동아 개와더니 직냐와 띵나서 숨로 존나다 잡고래도 삼바지나 되니 지 세제마 삼로땅 유릉보라 삼로땅에 된 쳐바지 차게레스 지 유통동라 삼로땅에 쳐바지 차고 말해 유릉보라 삼로땅에 쳐바지 차게레스 미다바디야 보검소나.
So in this analogy, then, the body is like the guest house, and the guest remaining, staying in this guest house is consciousness. And no matter how pleasant this guest house may be, no matter how happy we are staying in this guest house, at some point we will have to leave. There is no telling how long we can remain within this cherished body of ours. No one knows how long they will be able to remain within this body. And eventually, however, what is for sure is that what is certain is that no matter how pleasant it is, no matter how nice it is to remain within this guest house of the body, in the end, after an indeterminate amount of time, we will absolutely have to leave this body, this guest house of the body behind. And consciousness will have to continue on its own. Consciousness will have to leave the body behind and continue all alone into the next lives, which are a continuity that has neither beginning nor end. Consciousness is a stream that flows through an infinity of lives without beginning or end. And so for that reason, because only our consciousness will move on to the next life, it is extremely important to remember the impermanence of the body and of all other things in order to be careful in one's actions to ensure that our consciousness will meet with happy destinies in the next lives as well. That is actually why we practice the Dharma. Practicing the Dharma for the sake of this life only is really not that necessary. If your goal is just to be happy in this life, then doing good business, good work, eating good food, and traveling a little bit, going around is sufficient to be happy in this life. However, if one wishes to practice the Dharma, then actually the point of practicing the Dharma is at the very least for the benefit of future lives. At best, of course, one should practice the Dharma for the sake of achieving liberation, the state of liberation or omniscience, or the direct realization of the true nature. However, at the very least, one should practice the Dharma to ensure that after our death in future lives, we will be reborn as either gods or humans. Because this life, when you think of it, is actually very short. It doesn't last very long. However, future lives have no end. Since there's an infinity of lives, there is infinite amount of time that we will be spending in future lives. Therefore, not thinking of this life alone, but instead thinking of being mindful and careful of our actions in this life to ensure happy rebirth in happy states in future lives. One should be careful not to have too much attachment and craving in this life. Because whatever virtue we accumulate with our minds in this life will lead to happy rebirth in the higher realms in future lives. Whatever non-virtue we commit with our body, speech, or mind in this life will lead to, will result in the unhappy states of the lower realms of hell and so forth in the future lives. Therefore, a Dharma practitioner does not think of this short life only, but instead, a real Dharma practitioner, in order to be a Dharma practitioner, one should really have a very long-term vision, be long-sighted, in our objectives and think of the infinity of future lives and not just of this one.
신자 매와지네 당아라서 가르치고 그랬으나 드니 다 단지 공도 시어봤다 족보 종모레 빙자레 드니 주노 롱제레 야나 랑게 류 디페나 종칸다부 류레 델라드니 신자방 신자데 방네 델 아라서 추라 추 냠레 토상 검수 가래 지난 델라드니 춘투 투버 제고야데 개침버레스 델라 신자 뉴스 진니 파 추라 춘투치에 디 아니 티다 신자 봉세데 망라도 단지 칙 타마디 체딜려 통 야셀라렌세도 다 체딜려 통세도 단지 숨지도 당본이와 숨바 델라 체려 통세도 신자데 파 뉴스 진니 드니 추라 파 춘투 춘투 세월에다 춘투치에디 드니 개침버레 데 야셀라리 인송데 다송에 조디데 디 치버 치투바이나 되니 잠주선발기다 라렌 차두고레스.
So then if we are to abandon craving and attachment, how are we to do so? Or why are we to do so? It's, as I said before, the main objects of attachment, which are friends, relatives, wealth, possessions, and even this guest house of the body. We should reduce our attachment to all of those and instead put effort in our study, contemplation, and meditation of the Dharma. Reducing attachment and craving and instead putting effort in the Dharma, that is the practice of the Bodhisattva. As the text says, the practice of all the Bodhisattvas is to renounce this life's concerns. So renouncing this life's concerns actually means reducing or abandoning our craving and attachment in this life and instead putting effort in the practice of the Dharma. And if one can do so, then that really is the practice of the Bodhisattvas.
셀 미다보 곰네 셀르동 세디 이제도
And so this was the fourth preliminary step, which was reflecting on impermanence and renouncing this life's concerns.
nga바디 종해방바 세디레도 갈갱기 종해방바 갈비긴 종해방바.
The fifth is to avoid bad friends, which are obstructive conditions, negative conditions.
조고라 지다 조고니 용거도 최지긴 라오지나 최라 조고니 용거도 지 튕긴 게위 조고지다 갈긴 단다 라와지니 갈긴기 조 냠바 딕비기 조고세 니 용거도 나다카스 바바데 갈긴기 조고 딕비 조고기 게제시게레스 아데 숨구도스 나바디.
So for a Dharma practitioner, there are two types of friends. The virtuous friend, who is a conducive condition to our practice, and the destructive or bad friend, who is an obstructive condition to our practice.
책대 강단 조나 독숨패 줄신 퇴삼 곰비 자와 냠주르바 잠단 인지메버 줄지베 종엔빵 뽕바 자슬라리 예수.
And so this second type of friend, the bad friend, who is an obstructive condition to our practice, is the topic of this 5th verse, which reads, "The practice of all the Bodhisattvas is to avoid destructive friends, in whose company the 3 poisons of the mind grow stronger, and we engage less and less in study, reflection, and meditation, so that love and compassion fade away until they are no more."
강한다 드러나 도숨 피규르 싱세디 강한다 드러나 세다 가리냐볼 드러나 다 지다 미지기 미 다쳐바디 남주콜라 되자 뉴뉴 세다 뉴뉴 티무 뉴zam유기 미지기나 다쳐바지나 다코 족보 야나 종무 다 덴데지 지게 다 남주코 독숨디 뉴사 요레 콜라 남영에 시라메바 독숨이야 뉴잠시 데네코 쳐바 덴데지 유겐지나 다 니마지 나라서 다 등산 직댕 루솔라 직당 칼라냐 보사겐 로겐 지케자시게 덴들라다 족보 빼지 게 춤부지기 도야 다디 쳐바 다오지 삼로타나 타코 남주코 다 독숨디 뉴잠시 니마지 다 족보지 도 야나 종모지 툭제 대코냐볼라 자시동거 드스 다 자동거 드 자동거 드 용도 되니 다 계제 시행구라 야나 시기 계제 시기리 야나 도자 계제 시기리 야나 셰당게 계제 시기리 야나 차도 계제 다 계제 망보지 시행도 되고 쳐봐도 되니 코 덴델라 남행 차도 되고 도자 체로 셰당에 체로 되고 그 차도에 체로 드에 덴데다오지게 독숨 조봉해봐 데다오지 용선 예나 데 조봉해봐서야 참샤사디 독숨 펠 주게기 규지게나 다디 조봉해봐 차도고 다 데다보게 조보지나 아니 다 지금 랍주나 만도고레스 아니 가지 도나야 드니 지 디기 계절라 반나미 히라 마치바치네 아니 지라라 소소다 다 컨트롤 치투고에나 야보레다 가지 치마투메나 델리 강 링스 대신 야보요레스 데이터보 도보제나 다 독숨 펠 도고에나 되니 야보요 말에 델라 종에 바시게라
So basically, this is about the people we spend time with, and generally speaking, a Dharma practitioner should avoid spending time with people who have very strong attachment, anger, or ignorance, and instead choose friends who have less attachment, less anger, less ignorance. These days in the world, it's very important for most people to have friends to go places with, go out and have food, and so on and so forth, right? But if, as a Dharma practitioner, one goes out and meets a friend for tea, for example, and this friend starts talking about politics, starts talking about many topics that bring up anger or attachment or jealousy and so on, then the Dharma practitioner might get distracted by all this type of talk and see their own anger, attachment, jealousy, and so on increase as well. So that is meant here by a bad friend or a destructive friend. Basically, people that cause our 3 poisons to increase are destructive friends, negative friends, which one should try to avoid if possible. If one is able to kind of keep control of our own minds and not get swayed, not get influenced or distracted by these types of friends, then that's also okay. But if one is not able to remain undistracted or to protect ourselves from being influenced, then really it's best to keep our distance with these types of people who kind of are the cause for an increase in negative emotions. And so this is what is meant here by negative or destructive friends.
Duksum pel chugengi tobo tomosido injimiji mila koko mares. Ta duksum tingsan duzila duksum pel chuge tobo tomo mijibu maimba. Tini ngaranzu tingsangi technology re, tini social media re. Tenzu kaya ngazula da duksum pel chugu doaya. Pena da dendela namyang cha yandu zani tini chue de sanyi jigin, nangyi jigin, papa chide jin. Tiri nga temu jita gos, sanyi nga kare chue jigin sigido, namyang cha yandu da duksum di pel chugu doaya. Tenko ngazo na lazy cha. Ani de nanshingi da chokbo senare, mi mayimbi chokbo. Ani temo re, tsemo re, da mangbo jila sem namyang chi sona, tini duksun de mangro pel rugure, chue de chi tugu mare, ko lazy mangro cha rugure, ten chue de nani shi, ni chi pa chi jigin se yondo, ten chue chi tugu mares. De do chokbo chokmo se inji miji mi la koko mares. Kari duksun pel chugengi, kari jik nangi nyambo la chokbo nashi nyar digiyo na, di ta duksun pele yu cha rugure res.
And also, we shouldn't necessarily think of these destructive friends as only as human beings, as people. This can apply to other things as well nowadays. All sorts of technology, social media, and so on may also be the source of negative emotions for us of three poisons. If we get very distracted, thinking, for example, oh, today I'll watch this movie, tomorrow I'll do Dharma practice, things like that, then those types of things are also the cause for our three poisons to increase. Those things also make us lazy. Whatever distracts us from Dharma practice and increase our negative emotions, we can think of as destructive friends. Whatever causes us to be lazy and postpone our Dharma practice, distracts us from our Dharma practice, these are the destructive friends that we should be avoiding and that are the cause for an increase in the three poisons.
네, 디디 당보래 다 독순 폐교에 데데 자오지 조보지 여나 다 당보 빼 자오지 데데 조보지 여소나 다 가리 옛날에 미나 부모 옛날에 되니 랑빙자 옛날에 야나 테크놀로지의 소셜 미디어의 컨트리 저나 독순 폐교에 규축인지기 유지 여소나 디게 가리 지거스네 되니 가랑조 쳐봐 다 삼바다 곰바기 자와 추기 자와 가리 지내야 때 냠의 규칙이래스 마 냠주게 규칙이래스 다 최지스들전에 최지월 제발라 당보 tö바치고래 니바 삼바치고래 숨바드니 곰냠네 치고래 다디 동엠바 덴데지기 냠볼레 최소나 디니 디 최선 검순지기 레가 가리 제나 상마 냠도 그랬어 땡아 상이 대기 슈바나시레 다 가지 미 직대모지다 되나 다 tö바치도 말에 삼바치도 말에 내 상이 나니 지긴 파파파파 치대 장도 그러 디인데 tö바스 최선 검순데 냠도 그랬어.
So whatever the case, whether we're talking about actual human beings, men, women, friends, relatives, or whether we are talking about any type of technology, whatever we spend time with, that is a cause for an increase in our negative emotions, an increase in the three poisons, that will result in us, that will result in a decrease in our activities of studying, contemplating, and meditating on the Dharma. So whatever reduces our the time we spend or our interest in studying, contemplating and meditating on the Dharma, that is the type of destructive friend that we need to avoid. And so, like just as in the example that I gave before, that can be a movie or a show that we want to watch. And so we're constantly delaying our practice of study, contemplation, and meditation to the next day because we're so engrossed in this show. So these are the negative friends that are the cause for the increase in the 3 poisons and decrease in our Dharma activities.
Tene dadi niba da sumba dadi daw digbigi khasu gore thong nemba chigla nami songsona ta mi chigla pena midila tela sumba di jamna ingji meba jurje ba seduzani ta thong nemba di nyambo da the sona tene midila ngola ti midila jamningji yogenji jamningji yogen ta mi chigre tene ko ta ti midi jamninji yogi midi sani dong emba ji da che sona ta dong emba di nyambola dos do tene tanji nyola yuba na shi ko ta duksum ge ge ja da shi tene namyin cha tenko thokpa ge ge ja shi shedang ge ge ja shi do tanji midla jamninji yogi midi sani ko dong emba di nyambo do ko longsa bu nyambo do de do ko e longsa bu sha 남주 저 잠닝지 빼야고 다고도 저 저보다 빼 농사부냐 뭐 저도 거야 농사부차 다 잠닝지 상만 마 가서 그래 매버 주레스 매버 차도 그 가르스나 다 나저 엔지다 레도 미 소바 침보냐 뭐 저데나 랑 소바 침보차 야미 잠닝지 야보지냐 뭐 저데나 빼 미대 랑신 잠닝지 야보 차도에도 tene ya mi di lung sabo mi lung sabo chokpa tagen sha da nyam bo de na ni ma ji ra ya pe chokpa sawo lung sabo cha du do de ma pe do ji do pe na xin na jin na xin na chimbo tu bu ji nang lo la zen de ge xin ji na de xin chang ma kale zen de ge jema cha du gur se da na shi pe ji ge du ja la pe sha chu gur de du ga ji ge na de la kale che ni de yu jam ning ji me ba ju du res 간지 동네 받는 데지나 독소나 답변에 데모지다나 등상디 로 춘춘데 속에 비디오 게임들 제도 와르 막게 제고 빡빡빡 잡는 막 잡도 제 부구된 속에 셈바 시당 첨보 차기도 쓰이도와 비제 다 디야 되는 동네 맞차들다 이 게임디 되는 풋볼 데 게임들 좋다 봐이나야 되는 랑기 팀디 톱나 팀 듣고 롱랑이 시당랑이 심바들레 롱사버차 루고다 다디 롱사버차 소나 데니 잠닝지 사마파 냠루고 케랑게 듄라 미지 때부터 되나 쾌팀디 쇼나 코팀디 톱에나 하고 동해라 그때 그 롱랑지 산니 잠닝지 요겐자 냠주고레스 다델라기 잠닝지 요겐데 네바 주두고레스 규르위기 유치기레스.
So we explain these 2 middle lines and ask for the last line of the verse in English, so that love and compassion fade away until they are no more. Like I explained before, when we spend time with a bad friend, with a negative person, then even if previously one was someone with great love and compassion, after spending time together with a destructive friend, then one's own 3 poisons will increase if they speak a lot of, if they have a lot of talk of negative emotions, if they speak a lot with the 3 poisons, then we will get distracted by that. They have a lot of angry words, jealous words, and so on. Then with time, we ourselves will also come to be angry. So previously, for example, this Dharma practitioner previously may have had great love and great compassion, but after spending some time with their destructive friend who spoke very angrily, had a lot of angry words, then the Dharma practitioner themselves will also start feeling angry, will also give rise to anger, and lose the loving kindness and compassion that they previously had. So in the same way, we're all kind of like that. If we spend a lot of time with someone who's very patient, then we ourselves will become more patient. If we spend time with someone who has a lot of love and compassion, then we ourselves will become more loving and more compassionate. Whereas if we spend time with someone who is very angry, then we ourselves will also become angrier. It's like an analogy that's given that if you plant one sandalwood tree in a great field or forest, then all of the trees around will start smelling like sandalwood. So this applies to the good as well as to the bad. For example, nowadays, many children play video games, right? And many children may play war games. And these kids, they become really angry sometimes. And so in that way, the video game becomes a destructive friend for them. Or sometimes people watch a lot of football and get really excited when they win and really angry when they lose. Sometimes people even start hitting each other. If they're supporting separate teams and the other team wins or something, they might start hitting the people next to them for supporting the other team. So in that way, there are these negative companions that we have that actually increase our negative emotions, that increase the three poisons, and that reduce the loving kindness and compassion that we may previously have had.
잠다 닝지메고 줄지네스 다 데이터북이 톡보 잠지 닝지야 매버치게 대표삼 검숨이야 매버치게 독선 펼주게 데이터북이 톡보디 가세 톡보 따랑 톡보니 한번 루기에나 가리나 미나레 미 마인겐지 이나레 주자라고 이나레 딜라랑 딱지 약보 지지고래 딱지 약보 지두자니 데이터북이 딱지 지두 니 조금 해봐되기다 토삼 검수매 지미 주게 잠닝지야 용도 땅 주게 주게요나 독수미에 펼주게요나 되니 데이터북이 조보디 냠도 만들어야다 되니 데이터북 조보디야 빵 공액이 탑시 랑게 지고레스 데이터북 탑시 지게디 되니 장주심바 단다마 식기도 종해방과 자세라리 인스레 you there than talk go race in some tange dende tegi chanju semba nam ki lalen race.
So if we have such a friend, whether we're talking about a human being or any type of technology or whatever it is, that when we spend time with them, our loving kindness and compassion decreases, our study, contemplation, and meditation declines, and our three poisons increase, then we should really examine this situation. We should examine this friend, be it a human or any technology. And if we find that indeed spending time with this friend is the cause for an increase in our three poisons and a decrease in our study, contemplation, and meditation, in our loving kindness and compassion, then we should really apply ourselves not to spend time with this friend anymore, but to avoid them as much as possible. And that, as the text says, is the practice of the Bodhisattvas.
Hola, Tsering.
So we will stop here for today. And if you have any questions, you can write them in the chat. So chutang nangmi ki kurta nami nyamtu beya tang chu cheya ki tuzu kandes tangorel.
Nangmi nyambu
Da nanso nangmi yona puku tang kyoka kyemen dinde yona ani chu che dona da tuzu kandes sogorera.
Tanda ngai tenji midabe kapsu shue dang chong ngenpa se di changma da jik chue ngone shama yakbo ji chigen tende la gangsa la shugu yores da tanda ngarang su kapsu baba jikde da jik chue gu yangbo ji chigen ji na da nangmi jaji gya lamsang da tende chini chotugu mare kali kako res ina ya da rana susu ke dusu suyo go res tanda pena kazi nga shubai jidang komda jigyaba inare ta chue kari chinare thoba samba gomba kari na ya jig rangi tunji suyo go res chuzi yana chuzi cheka yana kama chu nga nishu sumju chuzi chi kazi kandeji chigi ina ya rangi dusu ji suyo di dusu dila tani jig ta nangmi ta tos jig gyang rings rangi dusu ji suyo ta nangmi ta ji lega inare nangmi inare pa shaa che tani di dona jig su rang tundila dona teche dusu teche ni dena tani nima dakpa ji schedule do cha dukura tun do cha dukures ta di rana su suyo na mato mikse da cha yunga si kala kapo res jikden ki lega re ko zawaya yo mares ko chi masu na.
So what we talked about today regarding this reflection on impermanence and avoiding negative friends, destructive friends, this is really, the text is really addressing real like complete Dharma practitioners. But for us in today's context, if we're practicing in a more relaxed way while remaining engaged in our worldly activities, then of course we can't just avoid our families so easily, right? So that's not really the point. What's important is to just try to make time for the Dharma. And so whatever, if you're going to meditate or whatever Dharma practice, Dharma activity you engage in, whether it's study, contemplation, or meditation, you should make sure to make time every day for a session, whether it's 10, 15, 30 minutes or an hour, however much time you have. Make sure to plan that in your schedule. And during that amount of time for your Dharma practice session, you should try to stay away from your family and really just focus on the session itself, on the practice session itself. And so try to work that into your daily schedule, however much time you may have. Because otherwise, if one doesn't make the time now and every day, then it will be very difficult to ever just find the time, since there's no end to the activities of this life.
Le tangbo chigina dinashi ngaransu force chini chigi dusu ji suyo gores chundri tos chi gores kanga sel gores pa ta chig lega rayona pa yu gores ka ta mixuka nipa yukche tun sugores teni kale rang sim dila rawan to nye chana teni cholam sa tung da sa nyal ro du khari ki cholam chiba ena teni nyamne korang nyambola deni teni korang rangshin ki cha rugres pena teni nyadu ena nyamne chitu begen da rodu ena re sadu ena re lega ledu ena ya teni temba tenchini ko tenshi 바위에 가는데니 냠내디 냠보라 치투그레스 당보 치투고 말 당보 가랑 당마 육니다 또 장링스 도지 지기 사자 나미 메사게 사자 더 랑기 수고레 도고레 되니 또 강아 치고레스 칼레 캡고레스 페나 애틀레틱 리스가레 단다 이 스포츠 짐나스틱 제게 네조 puguden스 도아 당보 강바 님베 칼레 캡 무주고도 강바 찍든서 파 캡네 강바가 님 ते kale ko kangba khawa changjang re do te ko jin bisi kale chaw mu gu mi da tangbo ngara cheba sawa indo tangbo tok si chundu chi kanga cheni pa sel ne de je go re te chi top na kale le na cha du ne khawa ina chwe dang den in bridge si do ni se dan chwe ni den ne do res.
In the beginning, as beginners, we need to make a bit of an effort to make the time to clear our schedules, to like really kind of put a bit of an effort to just set aside our work, set aside our tasks, stay away for a little while from family and distractions in general. In order to be able to practice the Dharma. But then slowly, as we gain more freedom in our minds, as we gain a little bit more control of our minds, then a Dharma practitioner is able to keep with the practice throughout all their activities, whether eating, sleeping, going to places, walking, and so on. At that moment, the mind is naturally always remaining mindful of the practice, always careful, always vigilant of the Dharma. And when that's the case, then one can practice anytime in any circumstances, but that's very difficult in the beginning. Of course, in the beginning, one must put a little more effort in order to really set aside some time for practice and clear away distractions. It's like gymnasts when they train at first, when children at first train in gymnastics, they sometimes go through a lot of hardship to kind of stretch out their bodies and stuff, and you see these children, young gymnasts crying as they're kind of like bending their body into shape, but then later on, as they grow in their practice of gymnastics, then they're totally flexible and can do anything with their bodies. But at first, they have to go through some hardship to get there. So it's the same with Dharma practice. At first, we need to put some effort into carving out the time for practice and in order to be able to really focus on practice. But then with time, it gets easier. Kandi chikletsun so the sangyeki ka nangla do chik nangla sangyeki so ludi ki kare sergi rede ludi torpo impate la gomgoresa dene ludi torpo ina kandes milieu rinpoche ki sampa kandes ki gorela
Di do nangse na duwe kapsu tani mig lu se mizang we ze sunju soni na chik shigi yore mizangbi zese di ta ngaranzu shencha ludele shencha shukchenbo yongdo zane dini di ludi da mizangbi tone dini tsangma mares ne dini ngaranzu tenla pabchi lule danji ngazu lule pe shukchenbo shencha yongdo zane shencha pa mewa suye ki tap dabare duwe kapsu shencha 다 단다 밀르rumbuche 세디 루치부 갑시기요 말레스 밀르rumbuche 세디 나랑도 심톡 니케제 시기요 다 단다 갑소바 나랑고 심딜라 고갑 세지도 추체기 고갑 기기 약부지 태요 어디기 다 디켄데 약부 태용도 딜 밀르rumbuche 시기요 스타 rumbuche 나신 lui yabo milirumbuche red nang lui khashi jishe yore pena dalwa ge jurwa chu nang la dalwa ge sidu zane ngaranzo lui dang sem niga ke je shige yore nyawa la yo mare nyawa ge dunga nyung yo mare sem da ida la yo mare lui di ida nang shi yo mare sem de ida nang shi yo mare deni thondro lui de thondro nang shi yo mare sem de thondro nang shi yo mare ta zo thanda kap so bo she de sem le shige de ya mi khashi lui mi gi lui lena sem thondro da sem 이닥도 sem nyalwa 나시 동안 용했는데 망보여 그러니까 대인도산에 단다 값서 니가기 류당 sem 니가기 시기여 년 류미기 류 질렌사베젤라 야 밀라야 미 망보여 미 팔와직당 페나 미 왕보 마상이 미지기 그래 미그마 동에 미여래 미라래 이나 미기다 지 왕보 마상도 신이 마상다오지 암주 마경에 가시 계자 칸이 계자시 미싱에 아니 디앙다 미기 나네 레데르다 조디 심기 토니 추기 가서 거래 냠용 하고게 냠용 투기 마시게 고되게 고되게 다 미 챙이로 시작이도 마시 저희 고시게 딜라 고거다 돈로 고고 말이 냐와 고고 말에 이다게 고고 말에 대인도산 데데다 망보 튕기에 되니 pena yul raoji samlota na ya nga zo ta yul africa longba da yul chue mesa longba la ma ke ba yang ji rang chue chisa gibi shini yesa dende la ke ta denzu mangbo shi ndo ta lu chi bu shi ge yo mares ta lu khorang ge rang shin ji dudang samlo ji ta na lu di ta mizang bi ze sumji soni dende ji yo de res de la nga ro kha ji ni da zimba chigi yoresene da dua kapsula de shigi dus ta milirumbuche sidusane sem da lunige thon shigi yores danda kapsba ba de lu di mizang wase di ngarang zu lu chibu sem shigi yomares ta lu gi mizang chik samla dan thak yore nak yore ta chapsang jingba chapsang chimbo te yakba se da 다 상하싱이 저 코바 나로지 오퍼레이션 지원데 온다다 미상마 들고에도 저버지 통용 거라 어딜레스기 그래서
So the next question was, in an earlier sutra, Buddha says to meditate on repulsiveness of 31 body parts. How do we reconcile this with the understanding of the precious human body? This is probably in the Vinaya that the Buddha teaches about the 32 unclean substances within the body. And this was taught to kind of counteract or to reduce the strong attachment that one may have for one's body. And so this was taught in the context, like kind of as a method for reducing attachment to the body. However, when we speak of the precious human body, this actually doesn't mean the body alone. This is not just about our physical bodies. The precious human body is really both about the body and mind. And basically having the physical and mental conditions for practicing the Dharma, the physical and mental conditions that create an opportunity to practice the Dharma. So that's really what the precious human body is. And so if we think about it, within the 8 freedoms and 10 advantages that define the precious human body. Within the 8 freedoms, for example, not being born, being free of the states of the hell realms, the hungry ghost realm, and the animal realm. Even these actually apply to both body and mind, so that we're not physically born as a hell being, but also our mind is not experiencing the suffering of the hell realm. We're not physically born as a hungry ghost, but our minds likewise are not experiencing the sufferings of the hungry ghost realm. We're not physically born as animals, but also our minds are not animal-like minds. Because really, when you think of it, sometimes some people have human bodies, but they might have the mind state of a hell being or a hungry ghost being or an animal. So in this way, really, the precious human body and all of its different characteristics concerns, it's comprised of both physical and mental aspects. Because again, even with a human body, still one needs to have a human body that has all the faculties, right? Some people may be deaf or mute or blind or not have full mental capabilities. And so really when we talk about the fully, the human body with all faculties, it means a human body that is fully human in the sense of being fully able to understand meaning, right? That's what kind of defines human beings, that we are able to understand meaning, the meaning of things in such a way that animals are not, or hungry ghosts are not, or hell beings are not. And on top of that, also one of the freedoms is to be free from being born in a realm where the Dharma is not available. So not being born perhaps in Africa or in other places where the Dharma may not be available at all. So in this way, the reflections, the contemplations on the 32 impure substances of the body, of the physical body, that's just to cut away our clinging to the physical body by thinking of the blood, pus, excrement, urine, and so on that are within the body, that if everything that was in our body was kind of like visible on the outside, then everyone would run away. So it's that type of reflection on the uncleanness of the physical body alone, whereas the precious human body is really about the mind-body complex and having the conducive conditions for Dharma practice. Takanishi Levson, it's Karikafut. How to say it? Payul Pongbate. Michiki that Payul Pongbate ki tundak Nanso Jalwa Tang Nangmi Tropo Sangma Pangores ki tundak Yorepe that Tamidi that Nanso Nama Kandishi left Sandra Nanso ta Nangmi Nyamto Tuzu Nangmi Nyamto Deya ki Tuzu Sogores Tang Chu ki Chea Tuzu Sogores ki Kandishi left Sandra midi ta nanso dineki kecha karishina jungson da nanso ne chu chindana sama pango marepes nami chopo ki delwa sama pango marepes dineki kandi chi levson da nanso payul panyaki tunda ne ta nanso delwa ta kur the responsibility dan sama pangu maretes
already dadi chue yang da ba ji du 당보 dadi pangwar jebala 당보 rangi thoba che guraya rang le panggo we jumsin she gure jumsin khaya ma she we ji dagas mang rosha na deni yang kuba uzu rocha ti chue ya ji du tu kumari karsana di she gurda she cha deni 지가 약보지 최시 중세 약보지 시 미다바 약보 중세 약보지 줄게 deni 장보시나 deni 파율 방에 대 게침보레 단지나시 미다바 갑술라야 deni 지그랑게 독보레 동모레 deni 빈자레 아마레 파마 다 카수이나레 연조다 윤노 롱제 참제 바르지 차용도 데 상마 빵거다 le thangbo bi gangsa je na di pha yug ni mando na di yue di nyambol de sha na di ge barji cha ang go chue chi du kar sa na de la shen cha shu chimbo ge yong du den bin ja kyong go re gyu kyong go re changma kyong de du du ji min do chue chi de ndo ta pha ro go ta chue mo ne sha ma yang da pa ji chi ji na dang ge gyu la ne ju ya bu ji ke mo ne chen na de go re ta chue chi gen ji yin sung de 된디지 고르다 제 디지고 삼마마다 세 침마다 지그랑 탐지진비 고방 토백이 시도 최원이 약보지 지기나 디 인지 민지 고레스 최지기 강사 디다보지 고레 다디 마임바지 등상 다지 또시 나랑조 레 당보지 다 당보 토바야시라 마치바 뉴뉴지 지지 최라 또시 다지 동나라 또 슬립 당아 취지 지고사레 삼나 톱자 고랑코 덴데지게 람라 드로투고 마라야 마투브드 데니 당보 르르지 도시 랑낭 빙자당 다 낭미당 파마레 수이나 율 다가랑라 데니 데니 지게 르르지 취 도스장 칼레 데니 랑 율라네 주 야보지 마지 버도 데네지 데 야보지 게 참나 데니 지 데니 파 육니 드나 디게 이제 파이봉스에 등의 가정이 주변이 파율스에 독순 펠사기 사자카와 연아디 파유차되게 다 파유 장마 육의 조양 녀몽바 셴바진 내잖아 되게 말이 김중방의 김진 랑선에 되게 말이 김중중주 방진 김천보지 양수 내잖아 되게 파이방게 말했어
So the next question was isn't the advice on leaving the homeland really an advice to get away from all sorts of social conditioning so that we can find out the fundamental truth for ourselves without the influence of these noises? Why is there a question of pandering to social pressures, trying to integrate Dharma with family life and so forth? So yes, actually, if one is a really serious, genuine Dharma practitioner, then one should abandon one's homeland and leave everyone behind. But first, one needs to study. First, one needs to gain a good understanding of the Dharma. One needs to understand how to practice and so on. And then once one has really gained a good understanding of the Dharma based on one's studies, and once the understanding of impermanence has fully arisen in our minds, and we have fully given rise to renunciation, then one can leave one's homeland. and leave all one's friends and family behind, all one's wealth and so on. Because of course, all of these things, all our loved ones, our friends, relatives, wealth are obstacles for beginners. Beginners do need to leave all these objects of attachment behind if they are to practice the Dharma earnestly. Not leaving them behind will eventually be an obstacle to our Dharma, because all of these are causes for further craving and attachment. Because with all the time we spend trying to take care of our loved ones, take care of our wealth and possessions and so on, there really is very little time left for Dharma practice. So if one is a very serious, genuine practitioner, then yes, one should actually renunciate all of that, renounce all of that, sorry, and leave it all behind if our goal is truly to reach the happy states of higher rebirth in future lives, and eventually the state of liberation and omniscience. If one is serious about that, then yes, it is absolutely necessary to abandon one's homeland. However, in today's context, for beginners such as us, who might not have much understanding of the Dharma, who have not studied the Dharma much, and who just have some interest in perhaps practicing the Dharma, then first, when we are just kind of curious and interested in the Dharma, then at first we start in a more relaxed way as we stay with our friends and family and relatives to take some time to study until we really generate some understanding, some renunciation, some true understanding of impermanence in our minds. And that's when, once we have truly once we have truly kind of embraced the Dharma with our minds, that's when we should abandon the homeland. But again, as I explained, the homeland here should be understood to be the source of the proliferation of the three poisons. So the homeland is the source of increase in our three poisons. If you leave your homeland only to go to another place where where again your three poisons will increase, then that's not of much use, right? Leaving a small neighborhood for a bigger one, leaving small poisons for bigger poisons is also not the point here.
Tela marba melerbe gigense gore lama marba la pesha baina marba kimpang yo mare ko khangba yore keme yore pugu yore singa yore gyu longje changma yore ina da marba gare ji yang sangge sangge du duba top du nyamle chitub du khandri ji cheresna ta chodi gyupang 파마빵 율빵 가즈고레 강바빵 세게 요 말이 쪼데 다다깝서 봐봐 상지기 상지 좀내데 유초라 데 가드유네 현자빵 세기도 규고레다 규라인 현자빵 파마고레다 파마라 현자 파마 먹으세요 요 말 파마 랩자르데 가 빵에 간디지 빵 걸 깔래 가버리나 파마라 뱀메세게 째와 첨부 지나 현자 망을 두고래 근데 현자게 제 용도자네 되니 쪼데 코르발레 카메기 규쪼데 현자래 다디 현자지 셰라 메바이나 되니 파요방 마 장보시는 빈자 방금 말에 강바 방금 말에 되니 현자의 용수당 투부기 유나 다 단다갑서 버버 숭에디 레 당보발라 가서 깔리 가버래 방투베 디나신 빈자 유살라 디 인도 토스 장랭스 도사나 디기 트루사기 율메도 되니 현자의 용으로 차기레스 숭레스 데라.
Actually, if you take the example of Marpa, Milarepa's teacher, Marpa did not abandon house, family, and so on. Marpa had a wife and children and fields and wealth and everything. And yet he had reached awakening. He had accomplished the siddhis. He had reached the fruition, not by abandoning homeland, house, friends, relatives, and so on, and wealth, but by abandoning attachment and craving. Of course, one needs some amount of wealth in this life. However, it's the attachment to wealth that one should abandon. One necessarily has family, parents. It's very difficult to just abandon one's parents. However, if one has too much, too strong kind of love and care for one's parents, then that's also a cause for an increase in attachment and clinging. And really, attachment and clinging are the main causes of samsara. So one doesn't necessarily need to abandon one's homeland if one can abandon attachment and clinging to all of these things of one's homeland. However, the point here is that for beginners, this is difficult. The text is addressing beginners who are very earnest about Dharma practice, and for beginners, it's difficult to give up attachment and clinging without distancing oneself for some time from one's homeland, from one's loved ones, from one's possessions. And so that's why it's important for beginners to distance oneself and remain in solitude for a while in order to decrease attachment and clinging. Tana 인사래.
No.
Oda kanid zoksa래.
Alas. Tini ngawasinis, right?
So we'll dedicate the merit now.
So namde tamjezik bani tamne be rana panjin yagana jimal trubai sibe solendro raiso chanju sinjurum baje madye bana Kibanyamba mebaya gone gondo galvara so dumbaji den kamsu jumba tembanye sindoza tenze benlob darjin gebaye demba yurinde be raji